High Commander Zorax's holographic form materialized on the bridge, her crystalline structure showing signs of stress. "Captain, our conventional vessels can't get close enough to analyze the phenomenon. Their standard shields fail under the quantum interference." Chen studied the sensor data, watching as the disturbance grew. The Prometheus's adaptive shielding might be able to handle it. Dr. Rodriguez, the chief designer's voice came through the ship's communication system. "Our irregular shield geometry could actually work in our favor here. The quantum fluctuations won't have a consistent surface to interact with." "We need more than analysis," Zorax interjected. "The colonial evacuation ships are too slow to outrun the disturbance. We need a way to stop it, or at least slow it down." Chen's augmented eyes narrowed as she processed the tactical displays. "What if we don't try to stop it? What if we redirect it instead?" The bridge crew turned to look at their captain as she manipulated the holographic display. "Look at the energy patterns. It's like a river of disrupted space-time. And what did we learn about rivers? They follow the path of least resistance," Harper said slowly, beginning to understand. "Just like our power distribution system." "Exactly. Zorax, I need your fastest ships to evacuate the colonies. Meanwhile, the Prometheus will attempt to divert the flow." The Archean commander's crystalline form vibrated with concern. "The risk to your ship is acceptable," Chen finished. "This is exactly what the Prometheus was built for, facing the unknown with adaptability instead of brute force." Within hours, the Prometheus hung at the edge of the quantum disturbance, its irregular hull reflecting the twisted light of disrupted spacetime. On the bridge, the crew worked with practiced precision, despite the unusual nature of their task. "Shield geometry adapting to quantum fluctuations," Harper reported. "Power systems are redistributing automatically to compensate for the spatial distortions." Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through the comm system from engineering. "The hull is responding better than expected. Those biomimetic materials are actually learning from the quantum interactions." Chen watched as the massive disturbance approached. "Begin power pulse sequence. Let's show this phenomenon what chaos theory can really do." The Prometheus's systems came alive in a carefully orchestrated display of controlled chaos. Power surged through irregular pathways, creating complex patterns of energy that extended beyond the ship's shields. The quantum disturbance began to respond, its flow shifting as it encountered the ship's unpredictable energy field. "It's working," Harper announced, his displays showing the phenomenon beginning to curve away from its original path. "The disturbance is following our energy wake, just like we predicted." From Concordia Station, Zorax and her staff watched in amazement as the human vessel literally danced with the forces of chaos, using its unconventional design to guide the destructive phenomenon away from populated space. "Remarkable," Chief Engineer Velnar whispered, his sensory filaments extended fully as he analyzed the data. "They're not fighting the disturbance. They're working with it, like a gravitational slingshot effect, but with quantum forces." The Prometheus continued its intricate maneuver, its systems adapting in real time to the changing conditions. Warning alerts flashed across multiple stations as the ship's structure was tested to its limits. "Hull stress increasing," Rodriguez reported. "But the adaptive materials are holding. Every exposure to the quantum forces is making them stronger, more resistant." Chen gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered. "Stay with it. We just need to maintain the energy pattern long enough to establish a new trajectory." For 3 tense hours, the Prometheus maintained its position, its irregular design proving to be its greatest asset as it redirected the massive quantum disturbance. Finally, Harper's tactical display showed the phenomenon moving away from populated space, following a new path into an empty sector. "Disturbance is officially clear of all colonial territories," he announced, allowing himself a small smile. "The evacuation ships report all colonists are safe." Chen released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Stand down from emergency stations. Begin damage assessment." Later, in Concordia's main conference chamber, Archean and human officers gathered to review the incident. The holographic displays showed detailed analysis of how the Prometheus had accomplished its seemingly impossible task. "Your ship's irregular design," Velnar said, addressing Chen and Rodriguez. "It didn't just survive the quantum disturbance, it learned from it. Our initial scans show that your adaptive systems have already incorporated new patterns based on the interaction. You realize," Zarek said carefully, "that the appearance of a ship like yours in our space will cause significant concern among our military leadership." Chen's smile widened slightly. "We're counting on it. The Prometheus isn't just a ship, High Commander. It's a conversation starter. Our government's authorized this mission because we believe it's time for our species to begin sharing technological perspectives. We have much to learn from your experience and stability." "And what do we have to learn from you?" Krethor asked, his tone somewhere between skeptical and curious. "That sometimes the most efficient path isn't a straight line," Chen replied. "That perfection can be found in imperfection, and that the universe is vast enough for more than one way of thinking about how to traverse it." Zarak studied the strange ship once more, seeing it with new eyes. What had appeared as flaws now seemed like questions given physical form. Each violation of standard doctrine was a challenge to centuries of assumed wisdom. "Very well, Captain Chen," she said finally. "I believe it's time for a longer conversation about your chaos theory architecture. But first, I must know, how did your military leadership approve such an unconventional design?" Chen's expression turned thoughtful. "They didn't. At first, we had to prove that sometimes the best way to advance isn't to build a better version of what already exists, but to imagine something entirely new. The Prometheus isn't just a warship, High Commander. It's proof that the impossible becomes possible when you're willing to question every assumption." The research facility aboard the Arxian station Concordia hummed with activity as engineering teams studied the detailed scans of the TNS Prometheus. Chief Engineer Velnar's sensory filaments twitched with barely contained excitement as he led Captain Chen through the facility's main analysis chamber. "Your power distribution system," he said, gesturing to a complex holographic model floating in the center of the room. "It shouldn't work. The energy fluctuations alone should cause cascading failures throughout the ship's systems." Chen watched the simulation with amusement. The hologram showed energy flowing through the Prometheus like water through a complex series of rapids, creating eddies and currents that seemed to defy conventional physics. "That's because you're trying to analyze it as a traditional power grid. We based it on organic systems, specifically the human nervous system." Velnar's filaments coiled in surprise. "You modeled a starship's power distribution on biological processes. Think about it," Chen said, manipulating the hologram to highlight specific power conduits. "The human nervous system isn't perfectly efficient. It's redundant, adaptable, and capable of rerouting signals when damaged. We applied the same principles here. When one power pathway is compromised, the energy naturally flows to alternate routes, just like neural pathways in the brain." Across the chamber, Dr. Maya Rodriguez, the Prometheus's chief designer, was engaged in an animated discussion with a team of Arxian theoretical physicists. Her augmented eyes glowed faintly as she projected technical specifications into the air between them. "The hull geometry isn't random," she explained, her hands tracing the ship's unusual contours. "Each angle, each apparent flaw, is calculated to create specific effects in both real space and hyperspace. We discovered that perfect symmetry actually creates predictable weaknesses, points where enemy weapons can focus their fire for maximum effect." One of the physicists, his crystalline form vibrating with skepticism, interjected, "But the structural stress is distributed through the entire superstructure." Rodriguez finished. "We used biomimetic materials that become stronger under stress, similar to human muscle tissue. The more force you apply, the more resistant it becomes." In another section of the facility, Lieutenant Jack Harper, the Prometheus's weapons officer, demonstrated the ship's defensive systems to a group of bewildered Arxian tactical experts. The holographic display showed what appeared to be major vulnerabilities in the ship's armor. "These aren't gaps," Harper explained, pointing to the apparent weaknesses. "They're active defense zones. When enemy fire approaches, these sections generate localized quantum field distortions. Incoming energy weapons are scattered, and physical projectiles are deflected by microscopic gravity fluctuations. It's complete madness," one of the tactical experts muttered, his carapace clicking rapidly in agitation. Harper grinned. "That's exactly what we wanted our enemies to think. The best defense isn't an impenetrable shield. It's making your opponents question everything they think they know about attacking you." Back in the main chamber, High Commander Zorax had joined the discussions. She watched as her best scientists and engineers struggled to reconcile human innovation with their deeply ingrained principles of spacecraft design. "Your entire approach," she said to Chen, "it goes beyond merely breaking convention. You've created something that forces us to question the very nature of technological advancement. Why? Why take such risks?" Chen's expression grew serious. "Because the greatest risk in an expanding universe is becoming trapped by our own assumptions. Humanity learned that lesson the hard way during our early space exploration. We kept trying to solve new problems with old thinking, and it nearly cost us everything." "The Proxima incident," Zarek said softly, recalling the historical records of humanity's first major space disaster. "Exactly," Chen nodded. "We lost an entire colony because our ships, built to exacting conventional standards, couldn't adapt to conditions we hadn't anticipated. After that, we realized that the true frontier isn't just space, it's our own limitations in how we think about space." Dr. Rodriguez joined them, her augmented eyes shifting through various spectral analyses of the surrounding technology. "The Prometheus isn't just a ship," she added. "It's a philosophy made manifest. Every system, every design choice, represents a question. What if? What if we didn't assume efficiency meant perfection? What if we embraced controlled chaos instead of trying to eliminate it? What if we built ships that could think and adapt like living things?" Velnar, who had been quietly analyzing data nearby, suddenly straightened his elongated form. "These readings, they suggest your ship's systems are actually learning, evolving with each engagement." "Another lesson from biology," Chen confirmed. "The most successful organisms aren't the strongest or the most efficient. They're the ones most capable of adaptation. We built the Prometheus to learn from every encounter, every battle, every unexpected situation. Its irregular design isn't a flaw. It's room for growth." Zarex's crystalline form caught the light as she turned to study the vast array of data displays surrounding them. Each one showed a different aspect of the Prometheus's impossible design, and each one challenged thousands of years of established scientific principle. "Your ship," she said finally, "represents either the future of space travel or its undoing. I'm not yet sure which." Chen smiled. "Maybe it's both. Maybe that's exactly what progress looks like. The uncomfortable space between what we know works and what we dare to imagine might work better." Around them, the research facility continued to buzz with activity as two civilizations' worth of scientific knowledge collided and sparked new possibilities. The Prometheus hung in space beyond the station's windows, its irregular form a testament to humanity's willingness to question everything, even their own certainties, in their quest to reach for the stars. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Arxian High Council buzzed with tension as delegates from across the sector gathered to debate the implications of the Prometheus's arrival. The chamber's crystalline architecture, normally a symbol of perfect order and harmony, seemed to reflect the uncertainty that had gripped the civilization since the human ship's appearance. Supreme Counselor Nexthar, his ancient crystalline form glowing with internal light, addressed the assembled representatives. "For 10,000 cycles, we have led the sector in technological advancement. Our principles of design and engineering have guided dozens of species to the stars. Now these humans arrive with a ship that defies everything we hold as truth. We must decide how to respond." Captain Chen stood at the speaker's podium, her uniform's subtle circuitry pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Behind her, Dr. Rodriguez and Lieutenant Harper sat alongside High Commander Zorax, an arrangement that itself sparked murmurs among the more traditional council members. "Honorable Council," Chen began, her voice clear and steady. "We come not to challenge your wisdom, but to share our own. The Prometheus represents more than just a different approach to shipbuilding. It represents the human belief that diversity of thought is strength, not weakness." The chamber's acoustic properties carried her words to every corner, where they were met with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. A delegate from the engineering cast rose, his crystalline form vibrating with barely contained agitation. "You speak of diversity, yet your ship's very existence threatens the stability of our technological foundation," he declared. "If word of this spreads, young engineers might begin to question established principles. Chaos could spread through our entire development program." With respect, Dr. Rodriguez interjected, standing to project a holographic display of the Prometheus's adaptive systems. "Questioning established principles is exactly how progress happens. Look at your own history. Every major advancement came from someone asking why or why not." The hologram showed the ship's systems responding to various challenges, adapting and evolving in real time. The display highlighted how the seemingly chaotic design actually followed complex patterns inspired by natural phenomena. "Your civilization achieved greatness through order and precision," Rodriguez continued. "We achieved it by embracing uncertainty and adaptation. Both approaches are valid. And imagine what we could accomplish by combining them." From his position near the chamber's apex, Senior Archival Master Kexri activated his own display, showing historical records of Arxian technological development. "There is wisdom in your words, human. Our own archives show that our greatest innovations often came from periods of controlled disruption." Lieutenant Harper stepped forward, his military bearing contrasting with the fluid movements of the crystalline beings around him. "The Prometheus isn't just a warship, it's a bridge between our ways of thinking. Its irregular design incorporates both human adaptability and Arxian precision. Each system is chaos and order working in harmony." The chamber erupted in discussion, crystalline forms vibrating at various frequencies as dozens of conversations overlapped. Supreme Counselor Nexthar raised his upper appendages for silence. "Captain Chen," he said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia of tradition, "your ship has already influenced our younger engineers. Reports indicate that several design teams have begun experimenting with unconventional approaches." Chen nodded. "That's exactly what we hoped would happen. Not to disrupt your society, but to spark a dialogue between our different approaches to innovation." High Commander Zorax rose from her seat, her military decoration catching the light. "Honorable Council, I have studied the Prometheus extensively. While its design challenges our conventions, it also offers unprecedented opportunities. The humans have shown us that there are paths to advancement we never considered." "And what of security?" another delegate demanded. "If we embrace these human methods, what becomes of our military doctrine? Our defense strategies?" "They evolve," Lieutenant Harper answered simply, "just as the Prometheus evolves. The strongest defense isn't a perfect shield. It's one that can adapt to any attack." Dr. Rodriguez activated another holographic display, this one showing the intersection of human and Arxian technologies. "We've already begun collaborative research with your scientists. The results are promising. Hybrid systems that combine the reliability of Arxian engineering with the adaptability of human design." Supreme Counselor Nexthar studied the displays intently, his ancient crystalline form reflecting the holographic light in complex patterns. "Perhaps," he said finally, "it is time for our civilization to embrace a new kind of progress. Not the abandonment of our principles, but their evolution." The chamber grew quiet as the implications of his words sank in. Captain Chen stepped forward once more, her augmented eyes scanning the assembled delegates. "Change doesn't mean losing who you are," she said softly. "The Prometheus proves that seemingly opposite approaches can work together. Order and chaos, precision and adaptation, structure, and flexibility. These aren't contradictions. They're complementary forces. High Commander Xerax joined her at the podium. The humans have shown us that the universe is vast enough for many paths to the same goal. Perhaps it's time we walk some new paths together. As the council session continued, the Prometheus hung in orbit above, its irregular form visible from the chamber's grand windows. To some, it still looked wrong, a violation of everything they understood about proper spacecraft design. But to others, particularly the younger engineers and scientists, it had become something else, a symbol of possibilities they had never dared to imagine. The emergency alert shattered the pre-dawn quiet of Concordia Station. Captain Chen burst onto the Prometheus's bridge, where Lieutenant Harper was already at his station, his augmented fingers dancing across the tactical displays. "Report," Chen commanded, settling into her command chair as the ship's irregular systems pulsed to life around her. "Massive quantum disturbance at the edge of the sector," Harper replied, his displays showing a spreading wave of disrupted spacetime. "It's destabilizing the fabric of local space. 3 Archean colony worlds are in its path." High Commander Xerax stared at the holographic display with all 4 of her crystalline eyes, each one focused on a different aspect of the impossible vessel that had appeared at the edge of Archean space. The ship, if it could even be called that, violated every principle of starship design that had guided her people's spacefaring civilization for the past 3,000 years. "Run the analysis again," she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had spent decades studying military doctrine. The junior analyst's tendrils flickered with nervous energy as they input the commands. The results were the same. The vessel's hull was an irregular pentagon, with apparent gaps in its armor that should have made it vulnerable to even the most basic weapons. Its power signature pulsed in an erratic rhythm that defied the laws of efficient energy distribution. Most puzzling of all, it moved like no ship Xerax had ever seen, executing maneuvers that should have torn it apart. "It's definitely of human origin," High Commander, Senior Tactical Officer Thor reported, his carapace clicking softly as he manipulated the control interface. The markings identify it as the TNS Prometheus. Xerax had studied the humans since their emergence onto the galactic stage a mere century ago. They were young, impetuous, and had an unsettling habit of ignoring established conventions. But this was different. "Show me the intercept footage again," she commanded. The hologram shifted, displaying the moment when 3 Archean patrol vessels had attempted to escort the human ship to a designated inspection point. The Prometheus had responded by performing what appeared to be a deliberate systems failure. Power readings dropped to nearly nothing. Its irregular hull began to rotate in what seemed to be an uncontrolled tumble, and several sections appeared to go dark. The patrol vessels moved in to assist what they assumed was a ship in distress. That's when everything changed. The tumble transformed into a precise spiral. Those dark sections blazed to life, with weapon systems that hadn't appeared on any scan. The gaps in its armor proved to be precisely calculated firing solutions. Within moments, the patrol vessels found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned by a ship that by all rights shouldn't have been able to function. "Their captain is requesting direct communication," Thor announced, his tone carrying a mix of professional detachment and barely concealed fascination. Xerax straightened her ceremonial garments, her crystalline form catching the light of the command center's illumination panels. "Very well. Let's meet the minds behind this aberration." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a human female with close-cropped silver hair and dark skin marked with subtle augmentation circuits. She wore what appeared to be a standard human military uniform, but something about it seemed off. Just like her ship, it didn't quite conform to expected patterns. "High Commander Xerax," the human said, inclining her head slightly. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran naval ship Prometheus. I apologize for the demonstration with your patrol vessels, but we needed to establish certain facts before making formal contact." "Facts?" Xerax's upper eyes narrowed while her lower ones continued to track the ship's bizarre energy readings. That your military doctrine, while impressive, is also predictable, Chen replied with what humans called a smile. The Prometheus represents a new approach to space combat and exploration. We call it chaos theory architecture. Krevthor's carapace rattled slightly, the equivalent of a suppressed laugh. Chaos. You built a warship based on chaos. Not exactly, Chen corrected. We built a ship that embraces uncertainty and adaptation rather than rigid structure. Every flaw in our design serves a purpose. Those gaps in our armor, they're actually metamaterial lenses that bend sensor readings. The irregular hull shape. It creates unpredictable radar profiles. Even our power fluctuations are deliberate. They make it impossible for enemy targeting systems to establish a baseline. Xerax felt her crystalline form vibrate with a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. You deliberately engineered inefficiency into your ship. We engineered adaptability, Chen countered. Your civilization has spent millennia perfecting a single approach to space travel and combat. We looked at those same millennia and asked, what if we tried something completely different? The implications were staggering. The Arxians had always assumed that technological advancement meant greater efficiency, more standardization, better adherence to proven principles. These humans had taken those principles, understood them thoroughly, and then chosen to go in an entirely different direction. 6 months after the quantum disturbance incident, the Arxian shipyards bustled with unprecedented activity. Where once identical vessels had been crafted according to millennia-old specifications, now a new generation of ships took shape, each one different, each one incorporating lessons learned from the Prometheus. Captain Chen stood beside High Commander Xerax in the observation deck of the newly commissioned Synthesis Center, watching as the first hybrid vessel prepared for its maiden voyage. The ship's design merged Arxian precision with human adaptability, its crystalline hull incorporating organic patterns that seemed to shift in the starlight. The harmony, Xerax said, her crystalline form glowing with pride. First of the Convergence class. Not quite as irregular as your Prometheus, but certainly not traditional either. It's beautiful, Chen replied, studying the way the ship's systems pulsed with a combination of steady Arxian energy patterns and more dynamic human-inspired fluctuations. A true blend of both our approaches. Dr. Rodriguez joined them, her augmented eyes scanning the technical readouts. The hybrid power core is performing beyond our expectations. Arxian efficiency combined with human adaptability. It's achieving energy levels we never thought possible. Across the chamber, Lieutenant Harper and Chief Engineer Velnar were conducting final systems checks. The unusual sight of a human officer working seamlessly with an Arxian engineer had become increasingly common throughout the sector. The defensive systems are remarkable, Harper commented, reviewing the simulation data. Traditional shields reinforced with quantum adaptive fields. It's like having the best of both worlds. Velnar's sensory filaments wavered with excitement. And the biomimetic hull materials, they're already showing signs of learning, but with a stability we could never achieve with purely human designs. The structured chaos, as you call it, is perfectly balanced. Supreme Counselor Nexthar entered the observation deck, his ancient form commanding immediate attention. Captain Chen, your Prometheus has changed more than just our shipbuilding. It has transformed our entire approach to technological advancement. Chen turned to face the counselor, noting how the traditional rigid patterns of his crystalline structure now incorporated subtle flowing elements. The change in design philosophy had begun to influence even Arxian personal aesthetics. The quantum disturbance proved that neither of our approaches alone was perfect, she said. But together, we're stronger than we ever could have been separately. Indeed, Nexthar agreed. Our young engineers no longer simply accept established principles. They question, they experiment, they imagine. Yet they do so with the precision and care that has always been our strength. Rodriguez pulled up a holographic display showing the next generation of designs already in development. Each one represented a unique approach to space travel, incorporating elements from both civilizations while pushing into entirely new territories of innovation. We're seeing similar changes in human space programs, she noted. Our tendency toward chaos is being tempered by Archean wisdom. We're learning that sometimes the most adaptive solution is also the most elegant. Through the observation window, the Harmony systems began their startup sequence. The ship's hybrid core pulsed with light, energy flowing through its networks in patterns that would have been impossible just months ago. You know, Harper said, studying the readouts, we originally named the Prometheus after the mythological figure who gave fire to humanity. I think we need to acknowledge that this time, both our species have given something invaluable to each other. Xerax's form resonated with agreement. The exchange goes far beyond technology. Our cultures are learning from each other. Where we once saw only rigid order or unpredictable chaos, now we see the strength and balance. As if to emphasize her point, a group of young Archean apprentices passed through the chamber, their traditionally symmetrical forms now incorporating subtle asymmetries inspired by human design philosophy. They were engaged in animated discussion with human engineers, each group learning from the other's perspective. The Prometheus was just the beginning, Chen said, watching as the Harmony executed its first maneuvering tests. Look at what we've accomplished in just 6 months. Imagine where we'll be in 6 years or 60. That's what truly sets our species apart, Nexthor observed. Not our differences in approach, but our shared drive to reach beyond what we know, to question our assumptions, to seek new ways forward. The Harmony's engines flared to life, its hybrid systems performing flawlessly as it began its inaugural flight. The ship moved with a grace that seemed impossible for its size, demonstrating both the reliability of Archean engineering and the adaptability of human design. To the future, Chen said, raising a hand in a traditional human gesture of toast. The Archeans present touched their crystalline forms together in their own gesture of celebration, the sound creating a harmonic resonance that filled the chamber. Outside, stars stretched to infinity, waiting to be explored by vessels that represented the best of both civilizations, ships that were neither purely ordered nor purely chaotic, but something new and wonderful that carried the promise of discoveries yet to come. The Prometheus hung in its dock nearby, its irregular form now looking less like an aberration and more like a bridge. Physical manifestation of the moment when two different paths to the stars had finally converged, opening up possibilities that neither species could have imagined alone.